That was today, right?
You didn't even want to read it.
Yes, I called this morning.
What's to spend your time, you know?
Where's your book?
Take your book. You already got a strike mark.
You got that right. You know he could be the first one to pick on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Say somewhere. That's your bag too small. You should catch up.
You get the right.
No, I think today they have they still have them back to school bag. Join that line.
Look at that. See, that's the right bag.
Swearing on no.
Oh, yeah, that's the right one.
See, she feeling it now.
You know, I was walking up and down, but I know it does feel warm.
I can try to lift it. Oh.
Hello. What's up?
I trying to figure it out.
I don't know what's going on. I didn't have my glasses this morning. You didn't tell me.
No,
when you want to have a real conversation. So I could look good. How much you
3 more minutes and I'm ready.
You don't need a big license.
What happened? You like a bad child. Sit to the front.
Can I see the one?
You can't see the one you know to the front.
Definitely wouldn't see it.
everything. I wasn't going to throw after this. Get some from last week. The secretary supervisor. That's my first time. Never reach age.
Yeah.
Never reach age. We could be able to do that.
You didn't say that loud.
I like that.
She said secret.
I will check.
You didn't say that loud. No, not too loud.
You're going to do it. Okay, let me move the fun there. Let me move the fun. I want me to check.
I'll keep them in check.
Moving over there.
This is the box. Yeah, you doing that for real?
No. This might be doing so. Hey. This is They can hear me? Okay, all right. So good morning. I normally like to start by just getting a feel of who's in the class, work experience, and so I know how to tailor our discussions. I'll start from my right.
Morning, my name is Makia Cooper and I'm a legal manager, a newly appointed MLRO. I've been here 17.
Good morning, my name is Suzette Moss, and I'm an account officer at RBC.
Good morning, my name is Rontia Ingram, and I work at FTF Evaluation.
Lavinia Smith. I work at Fidelity Bank.
Good morning, my name is Kenneth Road. I was employed at Commonwealth Bank as an account officer.
Good morning, Miyoshi and Bristol, Commonwealth Bank.
She's trying to be shy.
Good morning, Therese Kemp, Commonwealth Bank Operations Department.
Okay,
Kwame Ryan, Farmers Mortgage Corporation.
okay.
Kenyatta gets in Commonwealth Bank.
Oh, can you come back?
Good morning, Kristen Carter, Fidelity Bank Unit Compliance Officer.
Good morning, Tina Wright, Securities Commission Examination.
Good morning, LaShawn Clark, Risk Analyst at AML Sept.
Good morning, Alicia Delancey, Office of the Director of Public Prosecution.
You see? All right, so welcome. So this is intermediate, and most of you I know, so your mind is already geared to start the ICA in the next session. So this is to get you ready. That's why your book looks so thick. Because what I'm trying to do is to encourage you to read the documents. If you read the documents, you will find when you go into ICA, it's not that difficult, but it's less for you to read and less for you to try to grapple in that short space of time because it is a lot. And normally if I just set a sheet and say these are the links, no one bothers to open it. So it's there, so that means it'll be part of the exam. So you must read it. I'm gonna force you to read it. Okay? So that means that you answer a question and part of the response should have been referring to one of these appendix at the back, then points will be taken off. I want to force you to read. Okay? Alright, so let's start. When we always talk about money laundering, there's always everyone saying money laundering, money laundering. Why do I have to do this? Why is all of this important? Why in the Bahamas we have to follow all of these rules? Why are the rules always changing? And the key thing you have to realize is that everything to do with money laundering starts from an international perspective. And whenever you hear money laundering, you must know who they are. FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. They are the ones who set the goalpost as to what happens when you talk about money laundering.
Do I have to take notes?
So when you go to the back of your book, you will see 40 recommendations. And you must read them and understand them. Recommendations. Got it?
What page is that?
32.
30.
32, all the way in the bottom.
After you pass page 23, it's the first document. This one. This one. last page, can I pick? All of this. All of this. Yes.
What is the page
Found
number?
it?
My
You
book
found
is
it?
right here. Yeah, my book is after 17. Oh, it's after 17. Yeah.
After 7.
Looks like I'm learning the rest of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the recommendation, the 40 recommendation that every MLRO and compliance officer follows. Okay? So you must read them and you must know them. When you move on to the next stage, you're gonna see that it's referring to the number. Recommendation 1, recommendation 4, recommendation 5, recommendation 7. So you have to know what it is. So especially when you have a question, you have to know what it entails. How does it apply here in the Bahamas? So the first thing is you need to get familiar with the recommendations. So let's start with the FATF. So if you look at your notes, oh, you don't have any, you put a little mark here, because you need to read this tonight.
That's what you're talking
Right? Go back to chapter 1 now. Keep moving here because you have to learn these things. So the FATF in 2013 publishes guidance on national risk assessment. And those who are in the field know that the Bahamas had a session informing the public on this national risk assessment. In order to actually have a risk-based approach to money laundering, what the Bahamas did is the Bahamas introduced a risk-based approach. It started conducting on-site examination on a risk-based approach. Do you know what I mean when I say risk-based approach? You have to say, if you do keep your mouth silent, then I don't know. You understand what I mean? Yes?
Yeah.
No?
Yes,
Maybe
yes.
so? Explain. A risk-based approach means that what the regulator did and each institution was supposed to do is to identify what are the inherent risks in our business. And based upon that risk, then the institution had to put in place mitigating controls to address those risks. So the regulators introduced a risk-based approach. It asks its licensees to conduct a risk assessment of itself, where are our risks in our products and services, and put controls in place. What was missing is that we did not have a completed national risk assessment. Now, the key to the national risk assessment is that the country must identify where its inherent risks are. And based upon that, then it rolls down to the institution, because it tells you whether or not the risks you identify are not just only high, medium, or low for the institution, but what is it for the jurisdiction. So we got marked down for that, because we didn't have a national risk assessment that was completed. Now, if you haven't read it, you need to go and get a copy of our national risk assessment, and you need to read it. Because when you move forward, the examiner is looking to see if you know what the state of the Bahamas is with regard to money laundering. First thing. Then they want to know what has the Bahamas done since that. And what have they done since that? Introduced, not only did they introduce the risk assessment, they've changed all the laws. So when you go home tonight, your next homework is to get the Proceeds of Crime Act, the FTRA, and the FTRR 2018.
Can you repeat that again, please?
The Proceeds of Crime Act, the FTRA, and the FTRR 2018. And included in that is the wire transfer regulations also. So you need to familiarize yourself with that. So the next topic says why we need knowledge of all these international development. Why do you think it's important to us to know what's happening on an international level for money laundering? Why do you think it's important? Silence is not golden anymore. Why is it important?
That's what affects, that's what affects them, affects us.
What you was gonna say?
I said because what affects the international world affects us.
Right. Anything else?
It affects the regulation for the flow of cash in the country.
Anything else? Why do you think it's so important that we follow international standards and know what the FATF is doing?
So they don't get blacklisted.
So you don't get blacklisted? What you will find out when you, as you get deeper into this, you have the FATF and you have other regional bodies. That's why you look in your international your documents I have in the appendix. I put international documents from other jurisdictions. Because what happens in each jurisdiction affects this jurisdiction, especially if you're doing business with that jurisdiction. So you not only do you have to know what the common ground rules are from the FATF, and not only do you have to know what the Bahamas is doing, but you also have to know what each jurisdiction is doing if you're doing business with that jurisdiction. So, knowledge of the circumstances in which certain relationship and transactions can expose an organization and is important. What you saying?
I just said I need to start recording.
Recording what?
You.
It's recording.
Okay. Edit.
So, go to the next heading. International regional bodies in the AML Sept arena. It is relevant to understand the regional bodies in the arena for the following reasons. You have to know the risks that are actually identified for every country. Before you do business with a country, the first thing you do is you go to the FATF website and then you look up the country. And you see what was their last mutual evaluation report to see what risks are inherent in that jurisdiction. That's the first thing you do. Then it says punitive, remedial, or reactionary developments in respect of other jurisdictions may affect your business. So then you have to look to see what actions was taken against that jurisdiction. Can you give me a country where there are actions and punitive measures against the country? What silence? Who?
Barbados. I think Barbados.
Barbados?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to know the countries, just like how when the Bahamas had a CFATF report, and we had to put steps in place. You have to know all the countries that have to put steps in place, because that determines whether or not their AML framework is weak or strong. Because remember, when you read the guidelines, whether they're from the Securities Commission or from the central bank, it always says you don't have to do enhanced due diligence if it is from a regulated entity, from a jurisdiction that's on par with the Bahamas. So the first thing you have to see is the jurisdiction on par? What are the deficiencies? And because we have deficiencies, then people who do business with us, they are kind of skeptical as to whether or not we have robust AML program. And you can't blame them. Even though you may say your program is as robust as can be when you compare it to other programs around the world, based on the report that came from the CFATF, they don't believe it. That's the situation that we're in now. Because a lot of people take a policy that's already written from somewhere, you adapt it to what you want. But it's more than just writing it. It's doing it. If you're not applying it to what you do every day, then the policy doesn't mean anything. And if the country has laws, and the country is not applying those laws, it's the same thing, it's weak. So it says likely trends and changes internationally that may affect the AML framework in which you operate. So that's another thing. If you're doing business with a particular jurisdiction or particular market, you have to know the trends in the market. And when trends change, you have to look, what are the risks to your institution? What is the risk to this country? That's why the national risk assessment is key. Because it's not just you as an institution by yourself, but it's all the institutions in the same industry that are conducting business, either with the same jurisdiction or the same type of clients. And then of course, you within a jurisdiction, so it's the whole jurisdiction. And if you look at trends, and you look at the clients, then you have to see whether it affects the whole Caribbean jurisdiction. So you can't just think in silo, it's just Nassau, or just Bahamas. Whenever you either you issuing a product, or you're offering a service to your client, you have to think about what are the risks. Who does it affect? Where is it going? What is the AML risk rating for that country? What are the trends in that country? How can these products or services be used for money laundering, or proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, or terrorism? And that must always be in the back of your mind. Next one is any emerging typologies you may encounter. And you see this word a lot. Typology means reports. So I've given you some typologies at the back. So what they have done is the FATF and other regional style bodies have taken a particular product or service, and they have conducted a whole research on it. And they tell you how that product or service was used for money laundering. So when you get your questions for the international exam, they're all based on typologies. So that means you must do research. Because what they're looking for is not just what's written, but what have you found? And add to that, what have you found in your jurisdiction? So that's why I want you to start reading now. If you're using a particular product, what are the risks? When you read the typologies, most of them are not based here. So you need to see what are the risks, where they are, how does it apply here? And then go back to your organization. What do we have? We have this product. How have we addressed this risk? Because when you answer a question, you have to answer a question based on your knowledge and your experience. And if you don't have it, you don't work in the field, you have to garner that information now and build on it. We got it?
Yes.
Okay. Sources of additional best practice or practical responses on problematic areas. And that's key. You have to know how to deal with money laundering issues. You must know the role of everybody that's in an organization and the role they play. And who addresses what. So it says the FATF meets several times a year and brings together legal, financial, and law enforcement experts from more than 35 countries. So when you go to the FATF website, you can click on all of the plenary meetings and see exactly what they're discussing. You can see what are the emerging trends in money laundering. And you can actually read and see which jurisdictions they're focusing on. At the same time, you can see what updates other jurisdictions have done to address their money laundering deficiencies. And you have to get familiar. Because when you get an exam question, they can tell you the client is from Croatia. So if you've never read Croatia, then you lost. If you don't know what are the money laundering risks in Afghanistan, you lost. Because you work in a retail bank, you're limited. But when you do this exam, it's international. So it's not focused on just retail. It's retail, offshore, wealth, insurance, it's wherever. So you have to be well versed. So it says the FATF undertakes a range of tasks. It identifies and analyzes money laundering, terrorist financing, and other threats that are integral to the financial system. And they combat this by the misuse of international financial system, supporting national, regional, and global threat and risk assessments. So this is an ongoing, everyday thing, looking for risk. And if you're wise, you can subscribe to, I think it's Transparency International, and they'll actually will give you, every day you will see all the persons who are arrested for money laundering.
Where is it?
Human trafficking, proliferation of weapons. The different sites you need to know. Transparency International, there are lots of sites, but you can actually see who, if you're in this field, you need to know every day who's being charged and who's gone to jail for these crimes. So the FATF develops and refines the international standards for combating money laundering and terrorist financing and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. So this field is always evolving, always. Just on a daily basis, it changes. Same thing in an international arena. As they see trends, as they see more deficiencies, that mean things are changing, they will make changes to the recommendations. And that means we have to make changes to our laws. It assesses and monitors its members through peer review, that's mutual evaluations, and a follow-up process to determine the degree of a technical compliance, implementation, effectiveness of systems for combating money laundering. And that's what the Bahamas just went through. So if you go to the CFATF website, click on the Bahamas, and you will read the very first report, and you can read the last report, and see the efforts that the Bahamas is being done in order to make sure that we have fewer deficiencies than what we had in the last report. And remember, law is only as good as after it has been tried. And that's one of the criticisms that we have. We have laws. Who have you sent to jail? Nobody. So what's the purpose? So is the law really effective? And that's the question that, imagine if when you come in as an FATF examiner representing the CFATF, you're representing the FATF. And they're looking at it. You have all of these laws on the books. You have all of these financial institutions. You have all of this money. And not one person. How is that possible?
Everybody doing what they're supposed to do.
Really?
Everybody compliant.
You think so? What do you think is wrong?
Like I say, everybody compliant.
Everybody's compliant? No. What's wrong?
Also not
Fair.
being enforced.
Yes. The thing about it, in compliance, you have two roles. One is the MLRO, whose duty is to do what? Report. And then you have the compliance officer. What's that person's role?
To report to the FTF.
What's the role of the compliance officer?
They take it further,
They process risk. And if it's a dual function, you do both. So if you're just an MLRO and you have a suspicious report before you, you still have to go through this whole process in your mind. You have to be able to identify, is this suspicious? And to know if something is suspicious, you have to know all of this. Because you have to know whether it makes sense. So if you don't have the knowledge to know that 1 plus 1 plus 1 is equal to 3, then to you it's normal. The key is having that knowledge. And having the knowledge of not just how transactions operate here, but internationally.
So the problem is that they're not informed?
In some instances, besides the other one. You have to know how to identify money laundering. And the only way you can do that, because we're in a small jurisdiction, is you have to read how people conduct business in other jurisdictions. Because you wouldn't know. Do you know how they smuggle diamonds? Do you know how people carry cash abroad, large amount of cash? Do you know how pirates smuggle money? Do you know how people smuggle humans? How do they get paid? Because we may just be the last chain in the whole process. And these are the things that you have to learn to identify what are the risks, where is this money coming from? And when you hear a particular jurisdiction, certain things should come in your mind automatically. So I say Venezuela, what do you say?
Haven.
Hmm?
Haven.
Say what?
Persons who are not conforming.
No, from a money laundering compliance perspective, when I say Venezuela, what comes to your mind?
Drugs.
Let me see who's listening to the news. You gotta listen to the news to do this too.
That's the prime minister who.
Come on. No phone. Venezuela. No? Started with Obama, now Trump. Sanctions. Oil. No? Don't ring a bell? Iran.
Yeah.
No business with Iran. Why? They're deficient for AML? Okay. Let me give you a next country. Nigeria. Huh?
So you better start crooks.
But they do have legitimate business. You can say the same thing about Bahamians.
Yeah.
But they do have legitimate business. So you don't think of it as just scammers. When you hear jurisdiction, first you think about what is the political situation in that country. The next thing you think about, what are the major industries in that country. Then you go look for the corruption index. Then you go to the FATF site to see what was the last report done on that country. Where are its AML deficiencies? It says the FATF also identifies and engages with high-risk, non-cooperative jurisdictions and those with strategic deficiencies. So when you go on the site, you'll see the ones where they say they're high-risk and non-cooperative, and they are decreasing as they put measures in place to address their deficiencies. It promotes full and effective implementation of the FATF recommendations by all countries through the global network of the FATF style bodies. And we're going to go through all of those bodies in a minute. It assists jurisdictions in implementing financial provisions of the United Nations Security Council resolutions. Do you know what they are? The UN? Who visited the UN? Who knows where it is? Huh? You think you know? What y'all remember?
I don't remember where they've been.
Yeah,
And
New
everybody
York.
been.
Yeah.
Not too been, everybody been.
So it says it assists jurisdictions in implementing the financial provisions of the UN. So, United Nations, which has member bodies from different countries, they actually pass resolutions. So go to the United Nations website and look up the resolutions, and you'll see a list of resolutions. Most of them are against proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. So again, if you think of a particular jurisdiction, what's the first thing I said you must look at? Political. Next one. No corruption. Industries. What are the major industries? Next one. Corruption. Fourth one. AML deficiencies. And what's the fifth one? What's the fifth one? No, sanctions. Are there any sanctions against that country? So you have the United Nations Security Council resolutions. You have OFAC. Everybody knows what OFAC is, right? Those are the US sanctions. You have the EU sanctions. You have Canadian sanctions. Yeah, there's a lot of sanctions. So a sanction could be against an individual, or it can be against an actual sector. It could be, a resolution could be to freeze the assets of a particular individual. You can have a sanction if you're moving a particular product, or even offering a service. The person's in these jurisdictions. So you need to familiarize yourself with that. So put an asterisk on the side. You gotta read that too.
What are we reading?
You need to go to the United Nations website and read the resolutions. Then I want you to look up the EU has sanctions and the Canadians have sanctions. So like I started, I said everything to do with money laundering starts with the FATF 40 recommendations. Everything you do. So you must read them. If there is something as you're reading them during this course and you don't understand, ask the lecturer. Don't sit there and be quiet. Because when you move on, no one is going to read that for you and no one is going to explain nothing to you. So you must read it now, and if you don't understand, you can ask questions. So the key updates were more appropriate use of a risk-based approach, improving transparency around legal and beneficial ownership of legal entities. And you can see this trust for legal and beneficial ownership trickle all the way down to us. Because we just had a seminar or conference or briefing, whatever they call it, on Thursday, again about beneficial ownership. Because remember, everything now to do with money laundering changes as time changes. So wealthy people have gotten, they use the products that offshore centers offer, IBCs. And now with all the pressure for taxation, they're looking at where is the money going, how is it moving, and it's moving through these vehicles. And so now what they're asking for is, we have to know who own these companies. And in order to show that the company has substance in the jurisdiction, they're now saying that you can't just have an IBC that has a registered office and the IBC moves around as a company. It must have a physical presence. So even though they don't call them shell companies, because of the way they were designed, they're now demanding that they have an office and a person sitting in that office so that it resembles a company rather than a floating company for money laundering purposes. Because it's a lucrative business, and a lot of businessmen use that, an IBC, foreigners. They say more rigorous requirements for information on wire transfers, and we've seen that, especially now that we have these deficiencies. They don't allow no money to leave this country unless you know who it going to, when they were born. They want the middle initial. They want to know how long your client and that client was doing business. That's how serious it is. So if I'm sending money from here to a company over there, they ask you who owns that company.
Coming in too. Coming in too.
And coming in, yeah. In and out. And the funny thing is that these persons would have used IBCs, either incorporated here or other jurisdictions, for that purpose, that they don't want their names disclosed. But now they can't do business unless their names are disclosed. They say, who owns that company? Give us their date of birth. And if they run that name in the system, because you know there's only so many names, and it's very close, they'll ask you for the passport. So the world is getting even smaller. And that's why they keep saying that our financial industry is in jeopardy. Because why do I need to come all the way over here and buy over here? If the same thing that's happening where I am is happening here, it's easier if I just keep it here. And that's what we face today. So it says increased global cooperation between international authorities, tracing, freezing, confiscation, and repatriation of illegal assets. So here, just like other jurisdictions, we have the laws on the books, but we haven't done it. But that's not to say that we haven't had international requests asking us whether clients have accounts here in the Bahamas. But remember, in most instances, if a person is not trading, it's really just a pass-through. No one really comes and they say, I have 100 million, let me just leave it here and walk away. They had to come through here and they're trading in stocks and bonds or whatever. The FATF recommendations are by their nature advisory and must be implemented by individual countries in order to give them effect. And so the recent amendments that we just did in May is to ensure that we're in compliance with the FATF recommendations. But one thing I notice is that everything is a matter of interpretation. And so as you read the recommendation and you read the legislation, apply to what you see going on at work. Because everything is not black and white. And you have to see, how does this apply to me? How do we do this? And have we actually mitigated against this risk by the controls we have in place? That will always be to the back of your mind. So the FATF style regional bodies. So in the Caribbean, who's a regional body for the Caribbean? CFATF. We're responsible for representing the FATF in this region. What's the next one there? You have the APG. All of these are regional bodies. Every one of these. They're all regional bodies. And what they do, just like the FATF, they carry out the evaluations and they look for trends that's happening in the regions. And I put in your packet one of the typologies from Moneyval. And it's a Pan-American organization with 47 member states, reporting directly to its principal organ, the Committee of Ministers. And it just like the FATF does typology, the Moneyval does typologies too. So the FATF evaluation, the countries have a commitment to the implementation of the recommendations. That's what they do. And there's a two-tier approach. One, you have an annual self-assessment and the on-site mutual evaluation that's conducted by the CFATF here in the Bahamas. So each assessment takes 1 year to complete. The term is made up of 4 to 6 experts and 2 members of the Secretariat member. And a draft report is sent to the country. And when you read the report, it has the 40 recommendations and it tells you exactly where the country is, whether it's in compliant or non-compliant or largely compliant with each recommendation. The reports are discussed, and member countries report to the FATF 2 years after the evaluation, indicating their progress. So this is an ongoing thing. So the legal counsel from the regulators and the Attorney General office, they need to discuss this on an ongoing basis to make sure that they are compliant and what should be done has been done. So the FATF identified 31 jurisdictions with strategic AML CFT deficiencies, and that have provided a high-level political commitment to address the deficiencies. And that's when you saw when the CFATF report came out, you saw how the government officials were always in the news, because it has to come from a high level. If it doesn't come from a high level, that means you're not taking it seriously. So it must come from the top. Because a lot of people complain that every time the government wanted to give an update on CRS, why did the minister have to be there? He has to be there. Because you have to show the international arena that you're serious. If you're not serious, then you send any employee. But if you're serious, you send the top person. Why you make that snickering remark? I heard him. So to ensure appropriate risk assessment is vital that AML professionals are aware which countries appear on these lists and identify their particular regulatory flaws. I told you that already. And then it has the FATF has issued guidance or best practices on specific topics, virtual currency, and you know that is the thing of today. So if you haven't read it, you should read it. Transparency and beneficial ownership. And there are others. So the next international body is the IMF. You heard about the IMF? Yes? So the IMF conducts financial sector assessments and provides technical assistance to financial sectors. So, when we talk about VAT, where does that come from? Where all this VAT came from? 15%, y'all argue, they say 7.5, now to 12, you know it's going 15. So, where's it coming from? What's that force? The force is coming from the IMF. So the IMF, like the FATF, assists in making sure that a country is in compliance with the 40 recommendations. But it also has another role, which is the role in terms of financial assessment. And so they come in to evaluate our financial situation, and then they make recommendations. And that's one of them. So, money keep missing, they will go to 20%. Yeah, but it's a realization and a wake-up call. You're running a country, and a country needs money. And so if a country makes $10 and you take out 7, then the VAT will increase. Yes. The next group is the Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units, and they also have reports. You know the purpose of the Financial Intelligence Unit? He looking at me and that means you're blind. You don't? No, yeah.
Me?
You're here with the FIU?
Yeah, I've heard of the FIU before.
Okay, so what's the role of the FIU?
I think they're the ones that deal with the investigation part of it, no? Okay.
From the MLRO, it goes to the FIU. So they themselves have their own website, and you can go in there and read some of their typologies. Then you have the OECD, and I know you all know them very well. It acts as a forum for researching, developing, and refining economic and social policies on a range of different issues. And we know the most recent one is harmful tax practices. Then you have the United Nations. United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime was set up in 1997. And they have a lot of programs they've initiated to do with crime. So you can go to their website, and you will see all the different typologies they have on gun smuggling. Anything related to do with crime and drugs, they have a lot of reports on those. So it says it aims to fight against drugs, crime, and terrorism, and it does this in 3 ways: research and analytical work, helping countries implement treaties, and drafting domestic legislation, training and judicial officials on the ground. That's what the UNODC does. Then you have the UN conventions, and you'll see these conventions a lot when you do money laundering. So you can put on the side, need to read, highlight that. You have the United Nations Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism. You have one on corruption, and then you have the one on trafficking in narcotics and psychotropic substances. That one is called the Vienna Convention. And then you have the Convention Against Corruption. A lot of reading here. So let's turn to the report host recommendation. Which one? Similar to the ICA.
I mean, like,
Scenario.
short scenarios.
They'll be shorter than the ones that you would do for the ICA in terms of writing. But I try to put the style as close to it as possible. So you have an idea and you're not blindsided. Huh? So let's turn to our 40 recommendations. can hear plenty little mumbling in the car. What's recommendation 1? Assessing risk and applying a risk-based approach. So what do you think that involves? What else? Enhanced due diligence, yes. You know what that means? I see his feet get plenty wrinkles on his forehead. What does that mean?
Me, they always there.
Oh, they're always there. It always there? So the first one, assessing risk and applying a risk-based approach, also speak to the country, the national risk assessment. You gotta read it like that. 1, interpretive notes. Okay? You got it? Yeah, she got it. Interpretive. Yes, interpretive. 29. Okay? Got it? So, it tells you what it is in a nutshell. No, this is the expanded. You go to the first page and it tells you what it is. Next page. So, in summary, that's what it is. And this expands on it. Oh, your book never ready. You got it? Okay. So what's the second one?
National cooperation and coordination.
And what does that mean?
Country should have a national idea.
Go ahead, yeah.
Like risk. Says ensure that the policies are followed up.
Mm-hmm. And we have those. Recommendation 3.
Money laundering offense.
We should have money laundering offenses. And we fell short on this. So when you read the legislation, you'll see how they have expanded the legislation for proceeds of crime. See, read on page 32, number 7. Yeah. See that? Countries should ensure the intent and knowledge required to prove the offense of money laundering may be inferred. The legislation was just amended.
Page are we on?
30. Which makes it easier to bring an offense of money laundering. Because it can be inferred now.
Not even.
So which means that if you know that your friend or your spouse salary is only 30,000 and he's bringing you a ring that's worth 100,000,
Yes.
no bonuses that much.
Yes.
So that's what it's saying. These are the things that come to your mind. Because when he's charged, you will be charged too. Yes, ma'am.
On
Yeah.
On an inference?
Someone
Yeah,
give
I just read it to you. You didn't read.
I didn't get a chance to read inference. Just based on.
It says inferred. So take your time and read this.
That's very broad
Because you could infer anything.
So I want you to read the recommendations.
That's why they do
And
it
then,
like that.
right, and then I want you to read the Proceeds of Crime Act, 2018.
And you're right. Inferring one's okay.
Yes, by inference.
Get 'em in favor.
You have to realize that once you go in this field, you cannot be complicit with crime. You have to recognize it. Because really in an institution, you are the policeman. That's why they call you the gatekeeper. You are the police. You say what can and cannot be done. Because before they used to say the MLRO compliance officer is the one that goes on the bus. The laws changed. The law says you can carry the whole bank with you on the bus. All can go on the bus now. The buck doesn't rest just with the MLRO no more. It's all of them. But that's how serious it is. What's the next recommendation, number 4? You must read this. Read it, read it. What's number 4? Okay. And so we fell down on that too. So when you read the Proceeds of Crime and Act at the back, there's a whole new section on wealth. On wealthy people. Yes? So I know when I see one, you would have read that. Yes, a whole section on confiscation.
You got a week? Wow.
Yeah?
To read all that.
Yes, you have a week.
To read all that.
Yeah, that'll be your first read. You have plenty of reading. Start from today. A lot of reading. And that's why sometimes it's so difficult for people to pass it. Because imagine if you didn't do this at all, and you decide you want to start straight with the international course. When you write your paper, it wouldn't have enough meat in it. And the meat don't mean volume. When you write your answer, has no substance to it, because you don't know the topic. So you're just writing, skimming from what you read in the book. You haven't read all of these articles. You don't understand what's happening in the country. You don't know what movements are being made. And so when you write, if they compare what you wrote against what someone wrote in Singapore, Canada, it's no substance to it. So you have to read. What's the next recommendation? And what that one says? So I know they said they're gonna make some amendments to the act, but one thing is we can't be asleep. Because once, see, if you're in a particular industry, you're always trying to find where can I do business. So think about it, these people are smart. And if they think they can pass through a jurisdiction and get away with it, they will. So they're gonna have to look at how can we tighten up our legislation to address terrorism. Because it doesn't actually have to be someone carrying a bomb or flying a plane. It's the movement of money to facilitate terrorism. What's the next one? So you know that's the legislation you have to read if you haven't read it yet. The Anti-Terrorism Act and its amendments. What's this? Huh? Did you write it down right there? What's the next recommendation? Okay. Have you been through those just now? I sent you to read the United Nations, OFAC, the EU, and the Canadian side. They all have sanctions. And then the next one? Okay, so that one's for weapons of mass destruction. Remember that started with Sudan. They're still looking for it. Then the next one, number 8. How does that relate to the Bahamas? Read that.
Countries should
Hmm?
review
You
the
got it. Let's see if they really realize that. Let's go. Yes? Countries what? Mm-hmm. Ah, there you go. So you remember all of that noise about preparing financials and being registered? Okay, it's from here. That's another weakness we have. And it's a hole. And it has to be filled. Yeah, a lot of them haven't done it, and they're still in the process of actually working on it. So that's another one. Next one. Don't listen to him, man. You write the wrong thing in the exam. What's the next one? Wonder what that means. What does that mean? Go to the interpretive notes. That does not mean that. What the interpretive notes say? Number 9. No, but humans talk too much.
I don't have 9.
No 9. So what do you think 9 means?
In essence, could it be knowing that that someone is being reported and flipping them off? Or could it be that telling people information out there?
It's not reporting information.
Say ensure that your laws don't prohibit the implementation of the FATF recommendation. It means there shouldn't be any law that circumvents disclosure when there is an offense of money laundering. And remember, our confidentiality laws, they provide for disclosure if there is money laundering. So 10 is the big one. So in the FTRA, the first thing you'll see is financial institutions should be prohibited from keeping anonymous accounts or accounts in obviously fictitious names. And this goes against the grain of what we do every day in wealth management. Because a lot of clients do not want their names on the face of the account. You know who the BO is, but they don't want it on the face. So they may just say, name my account Parrot. But behind it, the person's name is John, whatever it is. They don't want it on the face. So they said they want that to be prohibited. Then they talk about due diligence and occasional transaction. What's the limit for transactions in the Bahamas? What's the limit? 15. But in other jurisdictions, it's different. So you have to be mindful when you're doing wire transfer, you're sending payments, to know what are the thresholds in those jurisdictions. So we have a lot of Chinese here. You send payments to Hong Kong, it's 10,000. And then they have other requirements once you hit 10,000. If you send 331, that's still 10. As long as it's adding up to 10, they're gonna stop it. So every country has its own threshold. It says the CDD measures to be taken are as follows: identifying the customer, verifying the customer's ID using reliable independent source. So all of these things, they have amended in the FTRA. to more or less mirror what you see here. And all institutions have 1 year to put it in place. Well, less than 1 year now, because May, June, July, August, and you have much time left. And then there's the record keeping. And the retention period is 5 years. That was what? 11. So 12. The next one. Helps. And a lot of institutions don't actually identify who the PEPs are. Because it's not just the person. It's the person and all their family and all of their close associates. And you get close associates by watching the news and reading papers. Because that's how money laundering takes place. Through the associates and through the family members. Not through the PEP themselves. Next one is correspondent banking. This is if you provide correspondent banking services. You have to actually review the AML policies and procedures of that institution in order to provide that service to them. And then you have to know their customer base. Money or value transfer services. This is why the central bank moved the money service business under its regulatory powers to address this issue, rather than them being standalone. Bring them under a supervisory body. Same thing with the credit unions. To bring them under supervisory body so they can be properly regulated. New technologies. You think that applies here? New technologies?
Yeah.
How? How do you think that applies here?
We're behind the 8 ball right now with technology. So
Yes, we are.
So everything coming in to us, they could be able to use it to do whatever they want to do it.
So the Bahamas is now on the verge of moving into technology. So the technology hub in Florida and the connection that we have with Texas Silicon Valley, which means that things are going to speed up more. A lot of things that we used to do even on a technological front will move even faster. And so it says here that whenever you move it into new products and services, technology based, you have to do a risk assessment. Because you're looking at things like,
Exactly. So you mustn't think that I'm new.
probably. Oh, okay, we heard you. Yeah, so you're looking at fraud, hacking. Those are the risks you have to look at. And so what they're saying here is you're not looking at it just from an institutional level, but you look at it from a jurisdictional level and then from a regional level. But technology is the way of the world today. And we have to get up to speed because we are far, far behind. No one does banking no more walking into a bank. How do people do banking? Mobile. Everything is mobile. Face recognition, finger recognition, transaction over. And so the changes you see in banking now here is moving slowly. But when you look at cost, efficiency, and profitability, one day it's going to have to move faster. And that one day may not be 5 years from now, it may be soon. Because even in terms of payment, you see the government has started their digital currency on a family island. So as we move to a cashless society, so all you do when you pay is you just do this and you go. No key, no password, you don't key nothing. You just touch it and it go. You go to Wendy's, you just glide it over the machine and you just go. if the money is gone. So the money stays on your account. You don't walk with cash. You just walk with a card. And everything is on that card. So you don't lose the card. Because the money will be gone. So this is what they're talking about new technology is. So when we introduce these things, like how the government said they're doing all this digital currency, they're moving towards that. Because what they have to do is twofold. One, is to keep up with technology, right? Your banking institution is already moving into technology. And so the country has to move into technology. And then when you look at things globally, the whole globe is moving away from paper. They either move into a digital currency, or some people move into cryptocurrency. But no one is spending that money no more, printing tons and tons of sheets of money, when you can just have a card and move it electronically. So we have to move with the times. What she said?
How many years later?
How many what? Years later?
Will they just stop writing your
The thing about it is that, the thing about it is that you may see it as a love, and then when it happens, it erases all the love. Because you just have to just reverse.
Just adjust.
You just adjust quickly. So it's just like now the old people going in the bank trying to use the ATM machine. Soon there won't be any of those.
Aren't there the process of eliminating pennies too now already?
Yeah, you get rid of coins. You're gonna fix the prices whereby there are no coins.
So they don't even.
And then you either move some of the notes into coins. Like you'll have like a $5 coin or a $10 coin. But that's what I'm saying. You notice they're not moving towards that. They're already moving into digital currency. So they're gonna skip that part. And just move you into digital currency. Because again, with technology and with the existing system, we're looking at risk. The risk is saying that the Bahamas is ripe for money laundering. Why? There's too much cash going around. Every movement is by cash. So you could imagine if our currency was not pegged the United States dollar and it was floating. So just how you watch those movies, people carrying sacks of money, everybody around here would be carrying sacks of money. Because everybody walks around with cash. So they have to get rid of that. And that's where they'll be able to monitor the ins and out of money, how money is flowing in and out of the country. How do you think they know how much money leaves here and goes to Haiti, Jamaica, Mexico? All through the money transfer business. And it's all consolidated, so they know. And they said that's another avenue for money laundering. And that's why they're so strict on them. And that's why they have to bring them in. Wire transfer, what's that one? Number 16. In all of the fields when you wire. You miss one field, payment stop. One field. And stop. And again, it says countries should ensure that in the context of processing wire transfers, financial institutions take freezing actions and should prohibit conducting transactions with designated persons and entities as per the obligations set out in the UN resolution. So how wire transfers work? When you send a wire transfer, the accounting officer does the processing. It goes through a system. And what the system does is it screens that payment against all of those sanctions. And anything that is a part of or close to, it puts a script. And the compliance officer has to clear that script. No, this is not that person. No, the person does not live in that jurisdiction before that payment goes out. That's one screening. When it gets to where it's going to the next bank, they do the screening again. And they may come up with something else because everything is not in black and white. 17. What's that one about? Reliance on third parties. What is that? What's reliance on third parties? This is talking about institutions that rely on another institution from another jurisdiction to introduce business to it. And this is why it's important you know what are the AML deficiencies in each jurisdiction. So if you're part of a group, this is what they're talking about. Your parent group or a subsidiary or affiliate introduce business to you. And you have to know whether or not their AML policies and procedures and its countries, policies and framework is on par with your jurisdiction. So that's when you go to the FATF. Look up that jurisdiction and see if they have any deficiencies. 18. So if you are a subsidiary, the parent company has to ensure that you have appropriate internal controls. Then they have higher risk countries. If you go to the Basel website, you will see they have a country index report, and it will list for you all of the countries in the world, and it gives you a risk rating on them.
What's that site again?
Basel. BASLE. That'll give you the risk rating of every country based on money laundering, terrorist financing, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and corruption and bribery. And they consolidate it into one score. Reporting of suspicious transactions. The new Proceeds of Crime Act now says that auditors, when they come in to inspect the bank or do reviews, carry an audit, they now have to report suspicious transactions if they identify them or go to jail. 21, tipping off and confidentiality. And we know the fine has increased for tipping off. Yes. And a lot of people don't understand what tipping off means. It's just very simple. It's very simple as saying, having a conversation and saying to someone, you know, my boss was looking at your file, you know. I don't know why. It's tipping off. Yeah, talk too much. Even going from one department to another department is tipping off. Because you keep it to yourself. 22? When you look in the legislation now, it includes the institution that it covers have been expanded. So you see gaming all the gaming is involved in all of this. The real estate agent, the lawyers, all, they put them all in. That's why the Compliance Commission is now key to all of this. All of their constituents have to follow the Proceeds of Crime Act and the Financial Transaction Reporting Act and regulations. So now they're going out now and doing inspections. And the real estate agents, the lawyers, and whoever else fall underneath them, accountants and all of those. So they say lawyer. Well, trust and company service providers fall under the Securities Commission. And the money lenders. And 23 talk about other measures again against lawyers and notaries and independent legal professionals and accountants. Because remember, when you read a lot of these typologies, they will tell you the loophole in offshore jurisdictions start with the lawyers. Because they're the ones who bring in the clients. They're the ones who sell the country. They're the ones who know where the money is coming from. And they are the ones who don't ask the right questions. Because they'll tell you upfront, my client doesn't want any questions, or ask my client too many questions. They're very busy people, very rich people, they don't have time for that. So for you to do your due diligence is gonna be very difficult. Because they're not going to get it for you, and the client is not going to talk to you. Yeah, beginnings like that too. 24. Right. So I want you to go 1, 2, 3, 4th line. In particular, countries that have legal persons that are able to issue bearer shares or bearer share warrants, or which allow nominee shareholders or nominee directors, should take effective measures to ensure that they are not misused for money laundering or terrorist financing. So you know the Bahamas legislation, we don't accept bearer shares. No, we don't have bearer shares in our legislation. Other jurisdictions have it. You have to be mindful now. If you're in business, and if I decide I'm in debt, and I have to get out, and the only thing I have is this company, and this company is worth $2 million. If I have bearer shares, I can just give it to you. So think about it. IBC, that's the flexibility of it. In the Bahamas, we don't have bearer shares, so you can't do it. You have to go through the whole process and vetting process. Some jurisdictions don't have that. And even big countries like Switzerland, they still allow bearer shares. Because it makes the product more attractive, but it also increases the risk. Because I can think right now, she owns that company, and it's not her. She's already given it to someone else. And she owes someone, so she give it to someone else, and just keep moving. That's the risk. Then it says nominee shareholders. Nominee shareholders and nominee directors is our business. That's what we do as an offshore center. That's the service that we provide to a lot of the companies that are here. So you'll have the company itself named as a nominee director or a nominee shareholder. And underneath that, the employees of that company sign. And that's also a risk. Because remember now, in a nominee capacity, you're not the one who's actually carrying out the function. The BO of that company is flying all around making deals, but you're signing off. Companies should consider measures to facilitate access to beneficial ownership and control information by a financial institution. And so that's why it's key that you know who you're conducting business for. So in most instances, when you offer nominee directorship and nominee officers, that the BO of that nominee is a client of the bank. And these are just companies that he's using to facilitate. So you know who the client is and what the client is doing. 25 is transparency and beneficial ownership of legal arrangements. Countries should ensure that there is adequate, accurate, and timely information on express trusts, including information on the settlor, trustee, and beneficiaries that can be obtained or accessed in a timely fashion by competent authorities. So that won't be up down bar, because you don't establish a trust unless you know who the settlor is and who the beneficiaries are and to protect them. Speaks about regulatory bodies. 27 is on the powers of supervisors. 28 is on the regulation of lawyers and casinos and all the rest of them. 29 is on the FIU. 30 is on the responsibility of law enforcement and investigative authorities. 31 is on their powers. 32 is on cash couriers. I think there's a typology on this too. Countries should have measures in place to detect the physical cross-border transportation of currency and bearer negotiable instruments. Like I say, if you're in business, these instruments are instruments that people use when they're transacting. So we're used to saying large figures when people say they're buying a hotel. But if you're in a jurisdiction where somebody owns a whole airline, they produce in rice or what the thing is called, lithium and all that. These people are not walking around with cash. They have negotiable instruments and they pass them. And that's what people do. They're not gonna go to the bank to get a loan. They'll pass a promissory note or the negotiable instrument on to someone else and pay off the debt and then move on to something. So the next one is statistics. Currently, you should maintain comprehensive statistics on matters relevant to the effectiveness and efficiency of the AML CFT systems. And I know the FIU Deputy Director did a presentation on the number of STRs filed. But of course, the number filed versus prosecution, they don't balance at all. So you see what it says here? The statistics should include STRs received and disseminated on money laundering and terrorist financing investigations, prosecutions and convictions, property frozen, seized and confiscated, and on mutual legal assistance or other international requests for cooperation. So we fell down. We have STRs. We don't have no prosecutions, convictions, property frozen, seized and confiscated. So we fell down. And then of course there's guidance and feedback. And I think they're working on this. So you see the central bank just introduced their AML analytics unit. That unit is split into two. One goes out and inspects, the other one prepares reports, trying to develop trends and guidance to show where the risks are in money laundering in the Bahamas and how to address it. 35 is on sanctions. We talk about sanctions. 36 is on international, the whole G is on international cooperation. And I want you to know to see all those conventions that are international instruments on page 25. We mentioned some of them, and there's more. Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime. And that's a big thing now. We should know a little bit about cybercrime. Then you have the mutual legal assistance, freezing and confiscation. You'll see in the new wealth order and the Proceeds of Crime Act, lots of things about freezing, extradition, and then 40 is other forms of international cooperation, which is the MOU with other countries. So as you can see, this is a wide and deep topic. Requires a lot of knowledge, experience, comes to time, but you start off with knowledge. So I encourage you to go home, start reading, immerse yourself in this wonderful world of compliance. Any questions? Questions? You have a question?
I just said employers, because they don't like us, because they won't put us on the front line and lock us up.
Well, see, the thing about it is, you carry everyone with you.
Alright, so they got something to get at.
Yeah.
You were trying to go?
You're trying to go?
No.
No, but if you have the responsibility, you have to go. So no questions. You ready for this? What hoop means?
Actually, we love questions. A lot of questions.
She got one question.
Yes.
Okay, so what you're saying is, all of this, from here to where we go, then I must go to the website for Transparency International, that's it. I have to know the recommendations, read over the FATF, National Risk Assessment. These things I put up online by myself. Okay.
The FATF, we just went through that, now you have to read
Okay,
it.
just read it over. Then go to the United Nations website. I'm looking up the EU, the OFA. Okay,
OFAC.
Yeah, OFAC. So I just reading over those recommendations or whatever. Okay.
And then you have typologies, you have reading material. You can see how they, what they look for. And then what you do is you try to see how it applies to what you do every day. Because you have to be able to learn at the end of this how to identify money laundering. Good? Sounds like fun, eh? Yes.
And the
Yes.
final exam, this is like a paper, it's a 3-hour exam. Would
3
you have
hour.
to write a paper or just
You have to answer questions.
questions? It's just questions that they.
Are you ready, Mika?
Mhm.
Oh, it's over there.
She's ready.
Oh,
No.
yeah. Everybody have a section, eh? You two left, you have a section.
Yeah, but I write things out. All right? We good? All right. Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend.
No, we done.
Oh, this stuff is not nice, right? Hey, right? Oh, this stuff is not nice. Oh, really?